There are a lot of SMGs in Rainbow Six Siege, and picking the right one can seem a little bit frightening. So in today's video, I'll be giving you an SMG tier list so you know which are the worst and which are the best. Starting out in the bottom of F tier, we have the M12 that comes on Caveira. This is the worst SMG in the game, hands down. Maybe tied with a few others, but definitely one of the worst ever. First of all, it has terrible fire rate, with only having 550 rounds per minute. That, plus the fact that its recoil is at least a little bit considerable compared to other SMGs, makes this gun very, very bad. I don't really think anybody's going to disagree with me on that one, so let's move on to the next SMG, which is the UMP45 that comes on Castle and Pulse. This gun suffers pretty much the same fate. It has a really low fire rate of only 600 rounds per minute, and it even has worse stats with only having 26 bullets in the magazine. It only has 38 damage as well, which is not good unless you run the extended barrel, which I typically do, which makes the damage 42, which is a little bit better. On Castle, the SMG is also a tad bit better with the option to have an ACOG, but as you'll see with other SMGs on this list, I'm not taking in scopes into account to see if the SMG is good or not. But now that we've gone over the worst SMGs in the game, let's move on to SMGs that are just slightly better, which are the SMGs in the D tier. The first SMG I'm going to put in the D tier is the 9mm C1 that comes on Frost. This gun isn't bad, but it's still not great either, with having a very low fire rate of 575. The thing about having a low fire rate specifically on this SMG though is that because the fire rate is so low and the recoil pattern is also so low, this thing is a laser if you're able to hit the heads. It also has 35 bullets in the magazine, which is the highest we've talked about so far, and if you run extended barrel, it has 40 damage, which is what I do personally, but for most people that won't be the case, so you'll be rocking with 36 damage, which is pretty bad. Definitely not one of the best SMGs in the game, just like the next SMG on this list, which is the MPX. Now, the MPX has 31 bullets, and it has pretty low recoil. I'll give it that, but it does have two stats that are terrible. First of all, it has 830 fire rate. That's still slightly below average, but not too terrible. What's really bad about this SMG is that it only does 26 damage. That is lower than some pistols in the game, and it makes it to where you have to put a lot of bullets into somebody to be able to kill them. That is really, really bad. As an SMG, you should be aiming to only put 3 bullets into somebody to kill them, and the MPX takes much more than that, which is why it finds itself super low in the SMG's ratings. An SMG just as low that you may not agree with is the UZK50GI that comes on Thorn. The one thing I do like about this SMG is that it has really good destruction and it does 36 damage. Those are all pretty good stats that are okay, but it has really low fire rate with only having 700 rounds per minute, and it only has 23 bullets, plus the fact that its recoil is pretty considerable compared to the other SMGs that I'll be going over that are higher on this list. Definitely not one of the better SMGs in the game, but at the top of D tier nonetheless. Now that we've moved on from the D tier though, let's go on to the C tier. Now the SMG that I guarantee you weren't expecting to be as low as it is on this list is at the bottom of D tier, which is the MP5 that comes on Doc, Rook, and Malusi. The MP5 may feel great, don't get me wrong, I use it all of the time, simply for the fact that it has an ACOG. But like I said earlier in the video, scopes aren't going to make an SMG for me. This gun has 27 damage, which isn't great. It also only has 800 rounds per minute, which also isn't great. Now I will give it that it has a little bit low of recoil, but still pretty considerable compared to other SMGs, but not high enough to where I'm gonna dock off points, and it does have 31 bullets plus an ACOG in most scenarios. So it's not too terrible, but it's definitely usable, and you'll see that throughout the entire tier list, this gun included, and after, every gun I do think is good. Now that we've talked about the MP5, we have to talk about its brother, the MP5K. This gun is literally the exact same as the MP5, but just with slightly better stats. It has more damage with 30 damage per shot, 800 rounds per minute, 31 bullets, and its recoil is around the same. I will say it doesn't come with an ACOG, but like I said, I'm not going to dock points on guns for having ACOGs or not, so it's going to sit just slightly above the MP5 where it belongs. But now let's go over the last SMG in the C tier, which is the P10 Roni. The P10 Roni does feel great to use once you're good at it, but there are many glaring issues with this SMG that didn't allow me to place it any higher on the list. First of all, it only has 26 damage. That is very, very low, but often that doesn't really matter because of its high fire rate of 980 rounds per minute. So most of the time, even though you're not putting that much damage into somebody, you're able to put so many bullets into them that it kind of feels like you're doing a lot of damage. Another big issue with this SMG though is that it only has 16 bullets in the magazine, 15 if you don't have one in the chamber, meaning that this gun is very difficult to use if you're in a position where reloading is dangerous. I will say its recoil is very easy to control, which gives it a little bit of a buff in in my opinion, but definitely not something that's worth B tier and beyond. Speaking of the B tier though, let's go over operators that belong there. These are guns that are actually very good that I recommend you use on the operators that bring them. The first of which being the best MP5 in the game, which is the MP5 SD. This is the suppressed version of the MP5 that comes on Echo. This gun has 30 damage, which is more than the normal MP5. It has pretty much every other exact stat as the normal MP5, but it has a built-in suppressor on it, which makes it even better. It's literally just a better version of the MP5 and MP5K with a suppressor, which makes me want to put it higher on this list. Moving on from any MP5s though, let's talk about the next SMG in the B tier, which is the AUG A3. I do think this gun is a little bit slept on, because it does have 36 damage per shot and 32 bullets in the magazine with seemingly no recoil. The only issue I have with this gun is its low destruction status and the fact that it only has 700 rounds per minute. Like I said earlier, that's pretty low, which is why I didn't put this in anything crazy like the S or A tier, but in the B tier as a usable SMG that I recommend you still play with. Another gun that I recommend you use is the P90 SMG that comes on Doc, Rook, and Solus. Now you might be thinking that I'm overrating this SMG, but I promise you I'm not. Now it does only have 22 damage, and like I said, that is very low. But just like in the P10 Roni's case, it has 970 rounds per minute, which makes it feel like it does a lot of damage per minute anyways, so it makes up for that low damage status. Not only this, but the recoil is very easy to control, and it has 51 bullets in its magazine. That is one of the highest bullet counts we'll see out of any SMG in the entire game and in this video, which is why that plus the fire rate plus the easy to control recoil are all the reasons that the P90 is as high as it is. An SMG that I think is just a little bit higher though is the FMG9 that comes on Nook and Smoke. The FMG9 has 34 damage. That is around average for an SMG. It also has 800 rounds per minute, which is a little bit lower than a lot of people prefer, but still good enough in my opinion, and it has 31 bullets. The only real issue with this SMG is that it has high recoil even after its recoil buff. But once you get around that, it is pretty good, making this SMG pretty much the most average SMG and the benchmark for my tier list today. But let's move on to the final SMG in the B tier, which is the 9x91 VSN that comes on Kapkan and Azami. This SMG has 34 damage, which is around average. The only issue it has is its low fire rate of 750 rounds per minute, but because it has very little recoil and you hit heads with it anyways, I don't find that it matters all that often. It also has 31 bullets, which makes this SMG a little bit higher on my list than other SMGs, especially when you compare it to its damage of 34. It's very well rounded and very easy to use, which is why I put it as high as I did. But now that we've moved on from the B tier, let's move on to some of the best SMGs in the game, which are the SMGs in the A tier. The first SMG in this tier at the bottom of A tier is the K1A SMG that comes on Vigil. This SMG has 36 damage, which is pretty high. It does have a little bit of a low fire rate with 720 rounds per minute, which does suck, and it's the only reason I didn't put it higher. But it has very low recoil and 31 bullets. Mainly though, it's really just that damage and the recoil that makes me put it as high as I do. You can argue for this being lower, but just the feel of the gun makes me want to put it higher than maybe most people want to admit. Another weapon I have a strong opinion about is the Scorpion Evo 3A1 that comes on Ella. The reason this gun is in the A tier mainly has to do with its fire rate. It has 1080 rounds per minute. That is some of the highest of any SMG in this video and in the game. It does only have 23 damage, but like I've said with many other SMGs in this video, that is wildly made up for by its fire rate. Not only does it have a good fire rate and a good DPS overall, but it also has 41 bullets, meaning unlike the P10 Roni, even though you're able to mag dump people, you don't have to reload immediately after taking a gunfight. It's definitely one of the best SMGs in the entire game, not only because of its fire rate, but its ease of use once you control the recoil after its recoil buff, and just because of the amount of ammo that you have if you miss a few bullets, which is why I put it in the middle of A tier. Another gun that I might be a little biased towards is the T5 SMG that comes on Legion and Oryx. This SMG has 28 damage, which is very bad, but again, it's made up for its fire rate with the 900 rounds per minute fire rate it has, just like the P10 Roni and the P90 that I talked about earlier. It also has 31 damage, but the best part about this SMG is the fact that it has one of the lowest recoil patterns out of any SMG in the the entire game. That makes it very, very easy to use if you want to hit heads, but even if you want to hit bodies, it has such a high fire rate that you can do that too. Just for its ease of use and its consistency, I wanted to make it one of the best SMGs in the game at the top of A tier. But now that we've reached the top of A tier, it's time to talk about the 4 best SMGs in the game, which is the S tier. Now at the bottom of S tier, in 4th place for the 4th best SMG in the entire game, I have the PDW-9 that comes on Osa and Jackal. This thing is absolutely insane. First of all, it has 34 damage, which is great. Any SMG with at least 30 damage is naturally going to be good. It also has 800 fire rate, which is around average, but it has very low recoil and it has 51 bullets, which we talked about on the P90 being something that's very good when you're using an SMG. But having that much damage with the amount of ammo is something that no other SMG has in the game, plus it's easy to use recoil. Easy S tier for me. Just like the next SMG, which is the MX4 Storm that comes on Alibi. The only issue with this gun is its 26 damage, but like I've talked about many times in the past of this video, its fire rate makes up for it because it has 950 rounds per minute. That, paired up with the fact that it has 31 bullets and very easy to control recoil, makes this gun not only consistent, but on a 3-speed, very, very viable to use, and one of the best SMGs in the entire game. Now that one might be debatable in your head, and honestly, that's fair. But an SMG I guarantee you no one is going to debate in the S tier is the MP7 that comes on Bandit and Fenrir. This thing does 32 damage, which we talked about being very good, but the kicker is not only does it have high damage, but it also has high fire rate with 900 rounds per minute. That is crazy. But you know what? It doesn't lack in any other category in its statistics because it also has 31 damage and very easy to control recoil, meaning that this is one of the first guns on this list that has a near perfect stat line with absolutely no downsides. But it's not quite as good as the #1 SMG on this list and in the entire game of Rainbow Six Siege at the very top of S tier, which, as many of you guessed, is the Vector 45 ACP that comes on Mira and Goyo. This is absolutely insane. Now keep in mind, it does have 23 damage, which would have made me put it lower, but not only does it have high fire rate, it has the highest fire rate out of any SMG in the entire game, with not only having 900 fire rate like the last ones, not 1,000, not 1,100, but 1,200 rounds per minute. This thing shoots fast, and it hits hard. Something that shoots that fast, you'd expect to have even less damage, but it has 23, meaning that you don't even have to hit heads with this weapon. You can absolutely decimate opponents just with body shots alone. Not to mention its recoil is pretty easy to use if you use compensator and just pull down, plus it has 26 bullets in the magazine, which isn't actually on the low side of things compared to things like the P10 Roni, making this SMG not only one of the easiest ones to use once you get around to controlling its recoil, but hands down just the best one for pure killing power and pure killing potential. With that out of the way, that's it for this video. Let me know if you disagree with anything. My name's Alka, and check out this next video. I'll hope to see you there.